Confessions of a Circular Economy. Skeptic. The following is a personal account of engagements in spaces that can be broadly termed circular economy, CE, over nearly 2 decades. The thesis is that while there may be merits to the idea, circular economy as it has emerged in Europe deserves critical examination. At a time of growing backlash to sustainability agendas and mounting economic pressures on working people, the careerism and Davos elitism of CE thought leaders jeopardizes the credibility of the concept. Background: Circular economy. Circular economy, CE, proposes a change in the linear take-make-dispose paradigm. The vision is a regenerative industrial system that includes circular material flows, renewable energy, and elimination of toxic chemicals. The concept gained momentum in the late 1970s, but knowledge production really began to explode in the last decade. Scientific publications per year with the keyword circular economy went from less than 100 prior to 2016 to nearly 2,000 by the year 2020. This concept has been adopted in public policy by the European Union and has been integrated into the official national development strategy of China. The explicit drivers behind CE discourses are familiar to readers. These include population growth, severe anthropological and environmental impacts, scarcity of raw materials. What seems an uncontroversial concept has drawn criticism. Critiques. Critiques of CE relate to theoretical and practical dimensions, including its vagueness, sidestepping of epistemological or ontological questions, difficulties connecting waste streams to production, or lack of implementation clarity. Others critique CE as a technocratic, neoliberal sustainability model. Along these lines, CE fails to disrupt the capitalist status quo, tinkers with the current system, depoliticizes policy and industry interventions, individualizes social change agents as consumers, all while not giving up on unsustainable growth. Some critics go further to position CE as a hegemonic agenda, aligned to a technocratic eco-modernism that enables private sector actors to gain control over resources. One could argue that CE emerged in a Eurocentric bubble. Nutrient cycling was core to the livelihoods of peasant and indigenous peoples, before processes of industrial capitalism and colonialism usurped these practices. Accordingly, the narrative of leading CE NGO Ellen MacArthur Foundation that CE's popularity gained momentum from a small number of academics, thought leaders, and businesses within late 20th century environmental discourses of the global north is problematic. Personal account. From believer to skeptic. What follows are some CE-related professional experiences, over nearly 2 decades, that made me a CE critic. In short, I've seen a few individuals and companies get consulting contracts, speaking fees, and PR from the concept, but did not see much practical change. In advance, I'll note that the purpose is not to dismiss CE altogether. Workers and colleagues with whom I interacted were very capable people with positive intentions. CE aims to address real environmental and economic challenges. However, successful circular projects would entail fair wages, healthy workplaces, and job security so such people could actually get the job done. Experience in Europe, 2007-2009. My introduction to CE began around 2007 when I landed a position with Professor Michael Braungart in Hamburg, Germany. Braungart had authored, through a ghostwriter, the best-selling book Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things, ran an environmental consultancy, and had a professorship at Leuphana University Lüneburg. At least for the first few months, I was, naively, energized by the notion that science and design could resolve planetary environmental issues while also reinvigorating the real economy through a third industrial revolution. Cradle to Cradle occupied a unique space in the sustainability marketplace at the interface of popular environmentalism and industrial practice. Perhaps due to the popularity of An Inconvenient Truth, 2006, by the time I arrived in Hamburg in 2007, corporate boards and C-suites were searching for a compatible environmentalism. Whereas co-author William McDonough had commercialized Cradle to Cradle in the US, Braungart maintained the aura of the elusive German chemist in Europe. Braungart would command €5,000 for a 30-minute presentation, rattling off some random chemical equations to impress audiences and brandishing his radical credentials as a former Greenpeace activist. Amid Braungart's globe-trotting on the sustainability scene, details of implementing the vague vision for industrial clients were left to a small, contract staff in Hamburg. As Cradle to Cradle gained popularity in the Netherlands, I was assigned a relatively large project to implement the concept within a Dutch waste management conglomerate, Van Gansewinkel. It did not take long to realize that there was little substance behind Braungart's claims on the speaking circuit, and that technical aspects of the project were undeliverable. For instance, Braungart once sent a colleague and I to a plastics recycling facility in the Czech Republic to show them how to remove the element antimony from recycled plastic, knowing full well we did not have a method to do this. As a solution to the fact that the technical aspects of the project were going to be a flop, I approached the project from a perspective of change management and how waste workers could play a central role in sustainable transitions. A year was spent traveling to locations and delivering workshops for waste workers throughout the Netherlands. After the year, we met the executive board for a project review. Board members were visibly aggravated that Cradle to Cradle did not yield more practical financial benefits for the company. Positioned between a sustainability guru, a toxic, unsupportive workplace, and corporate interest with a task that I felt unable to deliver, I decided to leave and return to Canada in 2009. As punishment for leaving, Braungart withheld my pay for the project work completed. The waste company continued with Cradle to Cradle for a few years, before the owner, New York-based private equity firm KKR, filed it for bankruptcy. Braungart has continued collecting speaking fees, was granted a professorship at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and eventually sold the shares in his consultancy to the German building and real estate company Dries & Sommer. Grassroots Movements, 2009-2016. The time after returning to Canada was marked by challenges gaining employment and processing the challenging experience in Europe. However, getting involved in civil society movements helped put things into perspective and provided a different view of circularity. Helping a citizens group in Eastern Ontario fight a large waste landfill project from Waste Management Inc. opened my eyes to environmental injustice and related literature. This exposed me to knowledge dynamics between corporate, state, media, and civic actors on the topic of waste in rural, urban areas around Toronto, Canada. In particular, I identified a scientism which dealt implicit authority to scientific and technical experts, while marginalizing considerations such as local autonomy, economic interests, and even a broader, more holistic view of scientific claims related to health impacts and safety. Around this time, I also began working more with NGOs in Central America. Work with farmers provided a view of agroecology as scientific discipline, agricultural practice, or political social movement. I saw how peasants and landless farmers in the global South resist the logic and imperatives of their marginalization and overcome the biophysical contradictions in capitalism to restore what are often marginal and resource-poor lands. Accordingly, despite their marginalization, the rural poor maintain political agency within the physical, chemical, or biological metabolism and economic independence from oligopolistic agrochemical and seed markets. I thus came to view agroecology as part of a conscious praxis within the material metabolism in order to resist both industrial agriculture and associated land grabs, as well as the inequalities of urbanization inherent to neoliberalism in the global South. This was a refreshing contrast to the green grifting encountered in Europe and North America. During these years, a common theme in civic, professional, and academic engagements was the tension between, on the one hand, eco-modernist and techno-scientific discourses, and on the other, nuanced perspectives combining historical and political analysis. While I still saw merits in circular economy, a critical lens was warranted to separate the wheat from the chaff. Recycling robots, 2020-2021. Unable to maintain steady employment in the environmental NGO spaces, I spent several years working in tech, a sector also deserving a critical lens, but that's another discussion. In 2020, I landed a research project manager position at a technical college, Conestoga College, Cambridge, Ontario. The projects were related to robotics and industrial automation for the circular economy. The role involved using shredding and sorting machinery, machine vision, and robotics to recover materials from electronics and other waste streams. The job demands overseeing a facility, implementing safety measures, commissioning robotics equipment, hiring, training, and supervising students, writing proposals, acquiring new projects from the private sector, and being a subject matter expert on complex automation design projects were not sustainable for one person. This, together with uncertain program funding and the program supervisor leaving, meant the role was terminated after the one-year contract. Notable from this time was the lack of necessary on-the-job training, which Crowley and Hodson, 2014, identify as a characteristic of the neoliberal workplace. It was not uncommon to have project Zoom meetings with multiple administrators and managers, none of whom were available when it came to the nuts and bolts work of CAD drawings, machining parts, installing pneumatics, etc., needed to implement the circular economy projects. The first assigned project to recycle pandemic masks, a project which apparently Justin Trudeau himself was excited about, had me scrambling on weekends looking for makeshift parts and solutions in my dad's old drive shed because processes and resources in the workplace were inadequate. Also, the exclusive emphasis on material recovery in the fast-paced, results-oriented, industry-driven research ethos, words of manager, precluded a more critical look at how responsibility discourses of large electronic corporations removes important parts of recycling realities from the discussion. In short, even if technically successful, it was questionable whether the benefits of these publicly funded projects went beyond a handful of companies and business interests. Conclusion. In light of these experiences, I've come to view the rise of circular economy through the lens of the political economy of knowledge production. Namely, ideas gain currency in the public sphere and receive corporate institutional funding because they are compatible to the interests of dominant economic actors. In the 2010 paper, Who Killed Rural Sociology? A case study in the political economy of knowledge production, the sociologist William Friedland describes push and pull forces, including research funds, discouragement from pursuing certain topics, and systems of social control that are embedded in institutional networks. In line with Friedland's account of push-pull factors, my own experiences chronicle two highly technical, eco-modernist roles that I was pulled into, as well as two civil society groups that I was pushed out of due to the lack of sustainable funding. Throughout, I would argue that knowledge and praxis of working people closest to actual material processes of circularity and waste was often discounted and marginalized. It is not enough to say that CE projects lacked necessary funding, managerial, and technological skills. It was more pernicious. Gurus, executives, academics, and other members of the professional managerial class, PMC, stayed hands-off in the background, reaping disproportionate financial benefits, PR, and notoriety, while precarious workers were left to pick up the pieces in dysfunctional, often exploitative situations. Solutions. Of course, it's easier to critique than to offer solutions. Critiques of CE, particularly those coming from academia, perhaps fail to account for the trade-offs and give and take of operating organizations and businesses. Also, critical observations outlined above are perhaps features of late-stage capitalism, or whatever we can call today's economic system, and not unique to CE. A starting point is workplace and community organizing for fair wages, meaningful work, and job security. Meanwhile, actors who profit and take advantage of others while preaching circularity can be put in check so everyone else can get the work done.